My husband got my client pregnant, so I got pregnant for another man. But when he found out, he snapped, and someone didn't make it out alive. People think betrayal is something you can prepare for, like you'd see the signs, feel the distance, and maybe even sense the lies before they're spoken. But nothing prepares you for the day the person you trust with your life hands you a truth so cruel it changes the way you breathe. For me, it started on an ordinary afternoon. The kind of day where you're focused on errands, bills, and dinner plans, not on the possibility that your entire marriage is already over. It was my job to defend my clients, to stand in front of them and fight for their rights. I believed in what I did. I believed in helping people through their darkest moments. But the client sitting in front of me that day, she wasn't just anyone. She was young, vulnerable, and looking for a second chance at life. I fought for her case with everything I had. I never knew she was also sleeping with my husband. I never knew she was carrying his child. When I found out, something inside me broke, but another part of me woke up. People will tell you that revenge is toxic, that it consumes you. But what they don't say is that in those first moments, revenge is intoxicating. It's the only thing that makes you feel like you're not drowning in someone else's choices. I didn't want a divorce. I didn't want a fight. I wanted him to feel it. The shame, the disgust, the betrayal. I wanted him to carry it in his chest like a weight that never lifts. So I did the one thing I knew would pierce him where it hurt most. I found someone else. And I didn't just sleep with him. I got pregnant. I thought I was in control. I thought this was my way of winning. But here's the thing about playing with people's hearts. You never really know which version of them you'll get when you push too far. I expected an argument. I expected tears, maybe even a messy separation. What I didn't expect was violence. The kind of violence that leaves blood on the floor and police tape on your front lawn. And if you think you know how this story ends, you're wrong. Because the night everything came to a head, it wasn't just about the two of us anymore. Someone else got pulled into the storm, and by sunrise, one of us was gone forever. When people ask me what my marriage was like before it all went wrong, I don't know how to answer without lying a little. I could tell them we were happy. And in some ways we were. We had routines, shared inside jokes, and the kind of rhythm couples develop when they've been together for years. But even in those years there were moments, tiny, almost invisible moments where I'd catch him staring off during dinner or hear his phone buzz late at night and feel something I couldn't name. Not suspicion, not yet, just a flicker. We'd been married for 8 years. I met him back when I was still figuring out who I wanted to be. I was ambitious, stubborn, and maybe a little naive. He was charming, the kind of charming that doesn't feel forced. He could talk to anyone, make them feel seen. It's what drew me in at first. And maybe that's what blinded me later. Because when someone's so good at making you feel special, you forget they can make other people feel that way too. I was building my career as a defense attorney. My caseload was heavy, but I thrived under pressure. My clients came from every background, some guilty, some innocent, all human. I believed in second chances and I fought for them like they were my own. I thought he admired that about me. I thought he respected the way I gave my time, my energy, and sometimes my peace of mind to people who needed it. The client who would eventually shatter everything came in on a rainy Tuesday. She was 24, soft-spoken, and scared in a way that didn't show until you really looked at her. Her case wasn't unusual, non-violent, a mistake that could have been avoided with the right guidance. I saw her as another person I could help, another life I could keep from slipping through the cracks. I didn't know she had already found someone else to catch her, and that it was my husband. Back then, my home life and work life never mixed. I rarely spoke about my clients at home, and my husband rarely asked. He respected boundaries, or so I thought. But looking back, I can see the threads. The days she called my office too late in the evening, the sudden interest he showed in my workload. the way his eyes lit up when I mentioned her case progress. I chalked it up to him being proud of me. I didn't know it was attraction. The first real crack didn't come from her. It came from him. It was a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when I heard his phone buzz on the counter. Normally I'd ignore it. But the name flashing on the screen wasn't one I recognised. No last name, just a first name, the same as my client's. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself not to read into it. But deep down, something told me I'd just seen the start of something I couldn't stop. I didn't say anything then. I wish I had. Maybe if I had, this story wouldn't have an ending that still wakes me up at night. But instead, I sipped my coffee, forced a smile, and pretended not to notice that my husband was already slipping away from me. One text at a time. For weeks after I saw that name flash on his phone, I tried to convince myself it was harmless. People meet through strange connections all the time, and maybe she just reached out to thank him for supporting my work. But the human mind has a way of pulling on threads until the whole thing unravels. I started noticing things, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. He started dressing differently. Nothing drastic, but enough that I noticed. Cleaner shaves, cologne he hadn't worn since our dating years, shirts I didn't remember buying. He was also distracted. Sometimes I'd be speaking and realise halfway through that he wasn't listening. His eyes would glaze over, his thumb tapping against his leg like he was waiting for something else to happen. Something that didn't involve me. One night, I stayed late at the office. I remember the rain beating against the windows, my desk lamp casting a small circle of light over a stack of paperwork. I called him to let him know I'd be home late. No answer. Not unusual. But then I called again, and still nothing. Hours later, I walked into our bedroom to find him asleep, or pretending to be. His phone was face down on the nightstand, and I swear I could hear the faint hum of a message notification. I didn't touch it. I wanted to, but part of me still clung to the idea that if I didn't see proof, maybe it wasn't real. That night I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing, wondering if he'd just had dinner alone or with her. The breaking point came the following week. I left court earlier than expected. I didn't tell him I was coming home. I wanted to surprise him, maybe even salvage whatever was slipping away between us. But when I walked through the front door, I heard something that made my skin crawl. His laugh. That low, easy laugh I used to hear when he was nervous or trying to charm someone. And then, her voice. I froze in the hallway, just out of sight. They were in the kitchen. She was telling him a story. I don't even remember what it was about, but he was leaning against the counter, his whole posture soft, comfortable, intimate. There was nothing in their words I could hold against him, but the way he looked at her was a confession all its own. He saw me before she did. His face shifted instantly. Surprise, then something else I couldn't read. Guilt, maybe. She turned, smiled politely, and started to gather her things. I stood there, silent, until she slipped past me and out the door. The air between us was thick, charged. "What was she doing here?" I asked. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. She needed help with something. It wasn't... Help with what? You're not her lawyer. I am. That was when his eyes darted away, the way they always did when he was about to lie. He mumbled something about paperwork, but his hands were fidgeting, his tone uneven. And that was the first time I realised he might not just be betraying me emotionally. He might be crossing lines I could never forgive. But before I could press further, he said something that stopped me cold. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. She's just been going through a hard time. I didn't think you'd understand." Didn't think I'd understand. I'd built my career on understanding people in hard situations. The truth was simple. He didn't want me to understand. He wanted to keep whatever was happening in the shadows where I couldn't touch it. And that night, as I sat alone in the living room long after he went to bed, I realized something. Whatever this was, it wasn't ending on its own. And if I didn't take control of the story, I was going to lose everything, my marriage, my dignity, and maybe even my career. What I didn't know yet was that by taking control, I was about to light a fuse I could never put out. It was 2 weeks later when the first real crack appeared in his carefully managed facade. He came home late, smelling faintly of cigarette smoke. And he doesn't smoke. His hair was messy, his tie crooked, his shirt wrinkled like he'd been in it for hours without caring. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him pour himself a drink, his hands trembling just enough for me to notice. Then, without looking at me, he muttered, "You're going to hear something, and I don't want you to believe it." That single sentence told me more than he realized. He was already bracing for impact. "What am I supposed to hear?" I asked. He took a long sip, then finally looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot, but not from alcohol, from lack of sleep. "She's pregnant," he said. The words hit like a slap. For a moment, I didn't even process them. "Who?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. He didn't answer right away. And in that silence, my mind filled the gap. My client. The woman I'd been defending, guiding, trusting. The woman I'd seen him look at like she was more than a passing acquaintance. "She told you?" I asked finally. "She didn't have to," he said. I could tell. That was the moment something in me shifted. The betrayal wasn't just personal now. It was professional. This was someone whose life I had been trying to protect, and he had stepped into it, dismantling not just my marriage but my credibility. If this ever came out, I'd be the lawyer who couldn't even manage her own home, let alone her client's trust. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. Instead, I sat down, clasped my hands together and said, "Then I guess we're even." His head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't blink. "I'm pregnant too." The glass slipped from his hand and hit the floor, shattering into pieces that skittered across the tile. For a moment, all he could do was stare at me, his mouth slightly open, his face pale. "Whose?" he asked, though the question was barely more than a whisper. I let the silence stretch just long enough for it to sting. "Does it matter?" I said finally. I watched as the realization sank in. Not just that I'd crossed a line, but that I'd done it deliberately. That I hadn't simply fallen into someone else's arms out of loneliness or revenge, but had made a choice to take something from him, just as he'd taken something from me. The next few days were a quiet war. We still lived under the same roof, but every conversation was edged with unspoken threats. He'd look at me like he was trying to figure out whether I was bluffing. I'd look back like I was daring him to call it. And then, just when I thought the standoff might last forever, something happened that turned our Cold War into open chaos. I came home one evening to find the front door ajar. Inside, the living room was in disarray. Cushions overturned, drawers pulled out, a lamp on its side. He was nowhere to be found. But in the middle of the kitchen table there was an envelope with my name written in block letters. Inside, there was no letter. Just a single photograph. A grainy printout of me and the man I'd been seeing, taken from across the street. Someone had been watching. And if that someone wasn't my husband, then he had gone to someone else. Someone who now had ammunition that could destroy both of us. I didn't know it yet, but that photograph wasn't just a threat. It was the first sign that someone in this story wasn't going to make it out alive. That photograph didn't just shake me, it rooted a chill deep in my spine. Whoever took it knew exactly where I'd be, who I'd be with, and the exact moment to snap it. The grainy quality didn't make it less dangerous. In fact, it made it worse. It wasn't some random passerby, this was surveillance, intentional. I shoved the photo back into the envelope and slipped it into my bag just as I heard the faint creak of the back door. "Who's there?" My voice was sharper than I intended. No answer, just the slow sound of footsteps on the kitchen tile. When he appeared in the doorway, my husband looked calm. Too calm. "I see you got my little gift," he said, eyes fixed on the bag where I'd hidden the envelope. I didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. "Was that supposed to scare me?" "No," he said, walking past me to pour a drink. "It's supposed to remind you that I have options. And friends." Friends. That was his way of saying he wasn't alone in this game. And if those friends were willing to follow me, photograph me, and deliver proof to my kitchen table, then they were capable of much worse. I decided to push. "And what happens when your friends find out you got my client pregnant?" I asked, tilting my head. He froze mid-sip, but only for a moment. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's the thing, sweetheart. They already know. And they don't care." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about us anymore. Whatever mess we'd made of our marriage had spilled into something bigger, something that involved people who didn't play by courtroom rules. The next morning, a plain manila envelope was slid under my office door. Inside were court documents. Not mine. Not my client's. These were arrest records, mugshots, and police reports tied to the man I'd been seeing. Things I didn't know. Things that could bury him in prison for years. There was a sticky note on top in my husband's handwriting. "Pick your side." By now, the tension had seeped into every part of my life. I started noticing the same car parked across from my office. The same man 2 tables away at the coffee shop, pretending to read but never turning a page. One night as I was leaving work, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. A male voice I didn't recognize said, "You're in over your head. Walk away now, or you won't get another chance." Then the line went dead. I stood there in the dark parking lot, phone pressed to my ear, the hum of the streetlights sounding louder than it should. Somewhere deep down, I realized this wasn't just marital revenge anymore. It was survival. And in this kind of game, one wrong move could mean someone wouldn't wake up tomorrow. The warning call played over and over in my head, each replay sinking its hooks deeper. "Walk away now, or you won't get another chance." At first I thought it was just a scare tactic, but then, less than a week later, I saw what no chance could really mean. It was late evening when I got the message. No name, no sender, just a location pin and the words, "Come alone." I should have ignored it. Every part of me screamed that it was a trap, but the location was an abandoned property outside of town, a property I knew my husband used for his private meetings. And something told me if I didn't go, whatever was happening there would spin beyond my control. When I arrived, the place was silent, except for the wind rattling the loose sheet metal on the roof. The front door was ajar. I stepped inside, phone in hand, recording. The smell hit me first, a mix of alcohol, sweat, and something metallic I didn't want to identify. My husband was in the center of the room, pacing like a man rehearsing his defense in front of an invisible jury. Sitting across from him, hands tied to the arms of a chair, was the man I'd been seeing, the man I'd gotten pregnant for out of spite. His face was bruised, blood trailing from the corner of his mouth. My husband turned to me, eyes wild. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I wouldn't make him pay?" His voice cracked somewhere between rage and something almost desperate. I told him to untie him, that whatever this was, it could still be stopped. But my husband laughed, that low, humorless laugh that told me I was already too late. Then he stepped aside. Behind him I saw her, my client, the woman he'd gotten pregnant, standing in the shadows. But this time she wasn't crying or begging. She was holding something in her hands. A gun. "Tell her the truth," my husband ordered. And she did. She told me that the pregnancy had been a lie, something they'd cooked up together to push me out of my own marriage, out of my own life. But when she realized he'd been seeing me behind her back too, with my own revenge pregnancy, she decided he deserved worse. The air in that room turned electric. 3 people, 3 betrayals, 1 loaded gun. I tried to talk her down, told her this wasn't the way, but her hands shook, and I could see her deciding in real time which one of them she hated more. Then, a deafening crack. For a moment I thought I'd been hit. My ears rang, my body froze. But when my vision cleared, my husband was on the floor, clutching his stomach, blood blooming across his shirt. The man in the chair screamed, struggling against the ropes. She turned the gun on him next. I lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. The shot went wide, shattering a window. We fought, the gun between us, until another shot fired, this one hitting her shoulder. She fell back, and I kicked the gun across the floor. It was chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the shots and called it in. I looked at my husband, his breathing shallow, his skin pale. For a second, just a second, I considered letting him go, letting the blood take him. After everything, maybe that was justice. But I didn't. By the time the police arrived, he was still alive, but barely. They cuffed the man in the chair for outstanding warrants, and my client was taken away on a stretcher, screaming my name like I was the one who'd ruined her life. In the official report, the police called it a domestic dispute gone violent. But I knew better. It wasn't just domestic. It was war. The kind fought with lies, secrets, and the kind of wounds you don't see until it's too late. My husband survived, but we've never spoken since. He's serving time for multiple charges, and I walked away without a scratch. At least on the outside. On the inside, I'm still standing in that room, still hearing that first gunshot, still knowing how close I came to being the one on the floor. And that's the thing about crossing certain lines. Once you do, you don't just change the game, you become part of it.